plan when we get married. We plan when we buy a car, a house, and when we have our children. We even plan how we save and when we want to retire. Throughout life, we pre-plan for most important things. Doesn't it make sense to do the same for our funeral arrangements? It may seem unpleasant, but it's just good planning. With expert advice from Belgroves family of professionals, they can help. Call or visit them first in San Fernando, Point Fortin, Chaguanas, Trin City, and Tobago. Or check their website, www.belgroves.com. Or call them 223-2178, 223-2178.
And of course, it is Wednesday. Today is May the 6th. We're starting a little bit later today, but we are still having this program. Of course, as promised, we have Dr. Jennifer Rous on the phone, and she is the former director of the Division of Aging in the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, and she is our friendly neighborhood gerontologist, which means that she has done a lot of studies and she has specialized in the field of understanding the elderly, the aging process, and all the different attributes societally that contribute to that specific topic. So she is on the phone with us today. Good morning, Dr. Rouse. Thank you for being here with us.
And a pleasant morning to you, to our listeners, and to our sponsor, Belgroves family.
And we had Mr. Belgrove on the phone with us last week, and it was a very insightful conversation.
Yes,
it might have
was.
been a little morbid for some of us because the topic was really about death and coping with the COVID-19 situation right now, how we have dealt with death right now, the changes that have happened with funeral arrangements, and there seems to be changes all around. And we've spoken about this when our journey started all the way in March. We were talking about life after retirement, and then we've come on to this journey of what does the aging population and the majority of the population do during this quarantine period and post-quarantine, because just now everywhere we are preparing to assimilate back into some form of normalcy. So on that path today, we're discussing that aspect of the legal issues and the elderly women who live alone, especially during this time when these women are alone and don't have anyone visiting, there's no one coming by. How are we navigating through this one?
Right, good, and the topic is on point because following what you just said, we have the elderly women who live alone, and even now what COVID has imposed, the ones who either are married couples who are elderly and others in different scenarios cannot now, even those who were having visitors, regular visits from their adult children who might pass through on their way home from work to just give them a hug, check in on them and whatever, they have to now wave from in the car and say, hi, everything is okay, and if they even have to give them something, they have to leave it at the gate or near the steps.
Because a lot of us have been extra... Oh, it seems as though we lost Dr. Rouse there. I'm going to have to call her back. So until then, I believe I pressed the wrong thing, so I'm going to have to call her back. But we are continuing on with this conversation in just one moment.
We plan when we get married. We plan when we buy a car, a house, and when we have our children. We even plan how we save and when we want to retire. Throughout life, we pre-plan for most important things. Doesn't it make sense to do the same for our funeral arrangements? It may seem unpleasant, but it's just good planning. With expert advice from Belgroves family of professionals, they can help. Call or visit them first in San Fernando, Point Fortin, Chaguanas, Trin City, and Tobago. Or check their website, www.belgroves.com. Or call them 223-2178, 223-2178.
And we are continuing our conversation with Dr. Rouse. Our call got dropped there for a moment, so she is here with us once again. Good morning.
Yes.
Yes.
And so there is a whole experience of aloneness and distance which is not even our cultural norm.
What I wanted to mention as well, a lot of us right now are dealing with this situation with we're trying to be as careful as we can be, to the point where we don't want to step inside and see our parents, because even though we may not be overcrowding, we don't want them to get ill. And we understand that the virus that we are dealing with targets the elderly more so, because they are more susceptible to certain illnesses.
Correct. They are what is the high-risk vulnerable group. And also what we have to bear in mind, more especially, is that many of us who are the younger ones, and even the young old, are asymptomatic. So we may not even know that we have the virus. We have no sign of symptoms whatsoever, a sniffle or a sore throat or a fever. So we may think that we are okay, and out of this love, we still may want to take a chance, because you find mom or dad look so sad when they can't greet us as they usually do. But we could kill out of love. So all of this we have to consider from a very selfless standpoint, that think of the other in this instant, that we are doing this out of love, and it is stressful on both sides, especially if you are close to your parents and have been accustomed visiting, as we said. But one of the points that as I mentioned to you earlier, that we need to address, more especially the elderly women who live alone, whether through being unmarried, divorced, widowed. Of course, we have the elderly men who live alone as well. But why we target the elderly females is because their lifespan is much longer. So they tend to live longer. And even though they tend to live longer, they are also afflicted with comorbidities, or what we now call pre-existing conditions or underlying health conditions, more than one. And that's what makes them more at risk.
Yes.
So it is not about genderizing in terms of saying the men are this and the women. Yes, there is a difference. Okay, so even though their male counterparts may live to be ripe in their old age, science has shown, the evidence has shown that they are less targeted in terms of all of these comorbidities. It is more on the women.
Yes.
Now, a point I have to make through my life experiences, not only as the director, but even in my normal social life, it always used to astound me sometimes, and I couldn't understand how to reconcile, where some of the women who are now alone in their old age, when they were in their working days, long ago you used to have a word called a stenographer. That was a popular post for women. Many of these elderly women now, they were executive secretaries that became, but it used to be stenographers.
Yes.
And you will find that a significant number of them would be highly efficient in terms of how they operated in the office. Yet when you had to visit any of them, and they would even tell you sometimes that their house is like the wreck of Hespera. How do you reconcile being very organized, highly efficient, in an office atmosphere, memory, your writing pad, and those days they used to take shorthand, everything is in order, but yet in your home, your domicile, in your living space, wreck of Hespera. And what do we mean by that? You may have newspapers nearly reaching the ceiling. God knows why you're holding on to them. And this is long before technology was there, so you know what happens to newspapers over time. They not only get brown, but they dissolve as well if you try moving them. And that is like early signs of hoarding. And I remember Oprah Winfrey mentioning once where she recognized it in herself that so many of us as women use 20% of our clothes 80% of the time.
What do we do with the other 80%? And we keep adding to it.
Some of the things can't even fit.
And yet we still buy.
Hold on to it as a memory of this is what I used to gallery with, as they say.
We hold on to the memory of many things. Whether it's a gift that was given, whether we bought something and we know it's probably of no use. Even in our fridge, we have products that are long since expired and say, no, it's still good.
Right. Now, you remember Peanuts is always my favorite. You remember his friend who walks with the blanket?
Yes.
That is your security blanket.
Yes, Linus and his blanket.
Linus and the blanket. You follow?
Yeah, of course.
And so, to comfort, it serves as a feeling of comfort. So all of these little signs we have to pick up very early in our aloneness. COVID now has imposed yet another layer to say now you have to stay inside. Mm-hmm. So if even you didn't want, you have to wade through all this clutter and escape by going to the mall and spend your day or go for your pedicure and your manicure because you're still looking like a number 10, eh? Mm-hmm. Or you're still trying to look as fashionable as possible. That is the image.
Yes.
But with the household and the home space and your decor, mm-hmm. you don't want to pay too much attention to that because you don't want to address that.
And Dr. Rouse, interestingly enough, if I may interject, we're looking
mm-hmm.
at this from the elderly woman perspective, but it starts from a very young age. And I'm looking
mm-hmm.
into, let's say, my millennial friend circle. That's basically the ages of 24 to about 27. Looking
mm-hmm.
at girlfriends now who live a life that is not dependent on finding a significant other. They are working women, and you go into their home and you see this stash of many material items that they continue to collect, whether it's makeup, whether it's jewelry, whether it's perfumes,
Correct.
and that takes up a lot of the space and the time. And now that COVID has infiltrated into the usual life of these individuals and of these women, of these younger women, mm-hmm. they don't quite know what to do with themselves because most of
Correct.
the time when they are out of their 8 to 4 job or their 9 to 5 job, they go out and they have dinner with their friends after work, they go on their dates on the weekend, whatever the case may be. And we're looking into the older group now where this is even more solidified in some women, maybe mm-hmm. through having children over the years. They have not spent significant amounts of time with themselves, and now that they have to, there is a large feeling of heaviness on the shoulders, but also discomfort
and a feeling of emptiness.
Yes,
because all those things, those trinkets and all those things around, they recognize they're not speaking to them. And then don't forget, some of them escape into Facebook. That's the younger ones, mm-hmm. and Facebook will tell you have 40,000 friends. But have you ever touched them? Have you been close to them? No. That was their virtual world. And so many have escaped into that module. For comfort, remember we have to deal with what is the underlying. All this dealing still with the psychosocial.
Yes.
So this is the underlying driver. Because I am feeling lonely. And for the younger ones, they will interpret that as boredom. And look for all manner of things on the outside mm-hmm. to comfort. So some turn to food, whether it's junk or otherwise, and that's where the processed food come in. And they look for this sense of comfort and company, in inverted commas, that is not physically there. And they feel haunted. And remember, we spoke of introverts versus extroverts. And all these are the different types of persona or personae that we have to grapple with to come to that place of alignment, because all of us along this continuum want peace. That is what the whole drive is about, you know. We want a place of peace.
And we're
Some
all
are
searching
alone,
for
yes,
it.
and they're trying, but the mind is racing like wild horses,
yes.
going all over the place, thinking of all the things that they had and would like to have again. What are the things they cannot have again? And they're hoping that some miracle will come. All of this is going on to get to that point of peace.
And if I may interject again, during my experience at UE, I did business studies, and you learn a lot of things along the way. But there was one class that we had called ethics, and bless Professor Surendra Arjun's soul, because he taught us so much about disease, and not disease in the typical way that you may think: cholesterol, heart disease, cancer.
Right.
Dis-ease is they're basically two words brought together. It's dis-ease.
Which I had mentioned in my first talk with us. When you hyphenate it, dis-ease
it's discomfort.
Is misalignment within your own self.
And when we spoke to Mr. Belgrove last week, we spoke about this concept of having a cultural disconnect when it comes to family relations and conversations
Right.
about the will. And I
Right.
really want us to get into that and touch on these legalities
Yes.
because these women have been living a life, whether they are at ease or dis-ease, and
Correct.
are now dealing with the who are widowed, those who are now living alone.
Correct.
Most of the time they are widowed. What belongs to them? Where do things go? Who has what?
Exactly.
How do we
and that's
navigate?
that's where I was leading. And
Yes.
but because you asked about going back a bit,
Yes.
that this didn't just start overnight.
No.
This started from way back.
Mm-hmm.
Way back. And from since I know myself as a child, I'm speaking about only age of 5 and 6, I have always liked order.
Mm-hmm.
I could not handle clutter. Everything must be spatial. I must breathe. And that has stayed with me as a landmark. So what you find, now what COVID has done, it has also imposed on us our own mortality. So can you imagine being now in the final stage of life? You know how you go through infancy and then you get to pubescence, which is puberty, and then you go to young middle adolescence. Sorry, that is another phase. Well, like yourself, when you're coming out from teenage now and going into the very beginning of adulthood, and then adulthood has 3 phases. And then we leave adulthood and go into senescence. Senescence is the final stage. But most people don't even like to hear the word when they are age 65 and over because it has senile in it, because that's where the word comes from. But senescence to me has such a plum. It has such grace with it in saying it. This is your final chapter. So forget calling just about the mortality issue. This is our final chapters. How do we prepare for this? And for those of us who live alone through the circumstances I outlined before, this is about bringing this order, bringing this alignment, bringing this peace. If you didn't have it before, now you are faced with it frontally. What are you going to do with it? Try to escape? How are you trying to escape? There is no mall to go to. There is no place to escape to. You are homebound. Learn now to love this space. Learn now to accept this space. This is me. This is, and whatever this home space looks like is an outer expression of me. So if you start sneezing because of when last you sweep the dust or whatever, well, find a vacuum or get a little vacuum. Or sometimes we can rely on, and I heard it said, if even you have a helper or somebody who can come to help, make sure now in this environment you are with your mask on in another space. Go away from this person who is helping. But if it is you have the strength, the physical strength to deal with it, this is where you start. The will is the end. The will is an integral part of the preparation too. But if we don't have the time to get into the whole aspect of that legal issue, which could take one of our whole programs, we have to start preparing psychologically, because we may say it and make it sound easy that, well, they have to prepare the will. No, some people face that with dread. With dread. Our country, our culture still has those things as taboo. But I remember when at work, I used to work in the airlines a lot, and some of the pilots, their wives never worked. And I was there as a pensions officer to witness that when it was on 2 different occasions, the pilots died from heart attack when they landed. And when the widows now came to the office, they hadn't a clue. They were totally clueless of certain basic things. Where was his bank? Where did his salary go? Didn't know which bank. At the time, we didn't have ATMs. So clearly, and then even in preparation, if even he had his account, and you didn't have one, it may not have been joint. So beside now that happening, and you have no clue where the bank is, nor his bank card, or anything, maybe where even he has his bank statements. You don't know. He would have been paying all the bills. Where are the bills? So you don't even know when the last bill, what period it was paid up to. Now, remember, this is a sudden death, heart attack. You have no questions to ask. He's gone. This is about minding your own business. This is the space you're in. And the asking of questions, because Mr. Belgrove hinted at it last week, where there are couples and there are couples. And that whole element of trust is questionable, because just the mere fact of your being inhibited or nervous to even ask the question, yes, and the response being one of aggression or suspicion, what it is you have here, what's going on here, what's the relationship? Because these are the things, these are the reasons how we grow. These are the situations that cause us to grow. And when the growth has to take place at a psychological, at a social, at a biological level, now you are faced with this situation that has shown you clearly how much you don't know. And that is a fear right there. Because you feel inept. You feel angry with yourself for not even thinking of these things before. You are bereaved because it is a sudden death. You may still be in shock. But at the same time, you are totally confused, because it will confuse even the organized person to know this person was looking very healthy, and how all of a sudden there were no warning signs. It just happened. What do you do? And so you now have to begin to not just search, but even know what questions to ask. Did he have insurance? If even he had insurance, what kind of insurance? Because you were in a bubble.
Yes.
You were in a bubble. You were just being taken care of. You just knew maybe bills were paid clearly, because lights never cut off, water running, everything going fine. You just had to more or less see about the children, make sure they go to school, and when they come home, oversee maybe the homework. But we are talking now about the administrative part of running your household. It requires management. It requires management, and you don't have to be a degreed person to do this.
And what I want to add to what you're saying as well, if I may, when we speak about mistrust here in Trinidad and Tobago, mistrust in a relationship, the first thing we think about is infidelity.
Yes.
And this is, you can have someone next to you all the time, and that's not even the issue at hand.
That's not the issue, no.
The issue at hand, I do believe, is a lack of self-independence, a lack of self-awareness, and a lack of self-preservation, because if you are not interested in taking care of yourself and standing on your own, you won't ever ask these questions. And this is what I really want to bring home to our listeners today.
We have to drill it down in more detail, because you hit on it exactly what is happening there. And you see, because of not wanting to take responsibility for your ignorance, because that's what is showing clearly now, all done by yourself, you tend to blame the least threatening object on the outside. So all the anger and all the phlegm and all what you're talking about, that has nothing to do with who you're firing it at, you know. It's all about how I could have been so dotish. What was I thinking about? Why no, you're not going there. So your very first visceral reaction to your ignorance is to lash out at whoever is nearby. So there are people that cannot handle that kind of death as it is, in the way it came, without that anger. But when the dust settles, you realize now what you were negligent in doing, what you didn't take responsibility for. And you ask yourself, did I really know this person? You know?
And most of the times, for a lot of people, that answer is no.
He may be thinking he was doing you a good, doing you a favor by relieving you of all of this. But this is about management. And if you know how to manage self and manage home and manage your space, you will begin to feel that inner alignment and that inner peace. That's the road to peace. It's about order.
And I want us to hold on to that thought because our time is now wrapping up. And, I always appreciate that we have a segue into next week's conversation. And I want to remind our listeners that Dr. Rouse will be with us on Wednesday as well. This program happens every Wednesday at 10:40 a.m. and we have been journeying through this, and for some of us it may seem so far away, and you tell yourself, this is not my world, I'm in my 30s, I'm young, vivacious, my family's not there, but we're dealing with reality, and the reality is that we all age. If we are blessed enough to be alive to get to that point of senescence in our journey, these are the issues that come across. And for those who are at that age point, maybe some of you are shaking your head and agreeing, yes, I've been through this, and you're very right, and how could I have been, as you said, so dotish?
And even though you are in your 20s, from the age of 18, you are now, and after 18, from 19, you are now an adult. And you have responsibility.
It's hard to feel,
you can have your driver's permit,
it's
you can
hard
have your
to
passport,
feel that way. It's
all
really
of those
hard.
things. You follow?
Yes, of course.
So it's about responsibility now and self-management. And that is where it kicks in with your self-awareness and your whole sense of self.
So I want us to hold on to that thought. And thank you so much, Dr. Rouse, for being here with us for another segment. And for those of you who are now listening, it's a different time. She's not even in the studio with us. She only was here with us a few times in studio, and hopefully that is something that we can continue with as well.
Because you're missing the energy.
Yes. So I want to say thank you so much, Dr. Rouse. And can you give a contact number for Belgroves if they would like to get in touch?
Yes, 223-2178. That's for Belgroves, 223-2178. Because Mr. Belgrove had a very informative and insightful program last week. And just for those who may want to ask certain questions of him, because he has a whole organization that deals with the whole process. And he really gave us a mouthful and a headful to go with.
So thank you so much, Dr. Rouse. We are Heartbeat
You're
Radio
most welcome.
104.1 FM. Keep well, and we will chat soon.
Most certainly.
The time is now 10 minutes after the 11 o'clock hour. We started that program a little bit late today, but we got to finish it, I think, in okay time. And we've got more music coming up. This is hour number 2 of your Wednesday morning's edition of Matters of the Heart. Rihanna Khan here, keeping you company until 2 o'clock this afternoon. We are Heartbeat Radio 104.1 FM.
We plan when we get married. We plan when we buy a car, a house, and when we have our children. We even plan how we save and when we want to retire. Throughout life, we pre-plan for most important things. Doesn't it make sense to do the same for our funeral arrangements? It may seem unpleasant, but it's just good planning. With expert advice from Belgroves' family of professionals, they can help. Call or visit them first in San Fernando, Point Fortin, Chaguanas, Trin City, and Tobago. Or check their website, www.belgroves.com. Or call them 223-2178, 223-2178.
Be inspired. Heartbeat 104.1. Radio for women and the men who love them.